Hello and welcome. In this introductory video, we are going to be learning what it means to write like a reader, which is an approach to writing that we will be using to help us better meet the needs of anyone who will be encountering our writing. You've probably heard of the concept of reading like a writer. Many English teachers use this process in their classes. To read like a writer means to read a text in order to understand the various craft moves that a writer makes and how those moves work to affect readers. We might then keep some kind of notebook or, we might store examples somewhere so that when we want to achieve those same effects, we can come back and look at the examples of how the professionals have done it. This is a really great way to become a better writer. Learn from the pros. To write like a reader is a slightly different approach to both reading and writing. When we write like a reader, instead of reading a text to try to say, what interesting things did the writer do here? How might I do it? We are starting from the idea that reader expectations are everything in comprehension. So we want to be thinking about how we are creating expectations in the reader through everything we do as a writer, and to what extent we're meeting the expectations we're creating with whatever we write next. And creating and then meeting expectations for the reader is how we move a reader from point A to point B, how we get them to agree with us if we're arguing, to feel what we want them to feel if we're telling a story. And if we don't constantly think about how a reader is receiving our words and the way we're putting the words together, we likely will, at least at some point, create something that confuses a reader or that doesn't achieve our purpose. So one of the main things we're going to be focusing on is what reader expectations are for all the different kinds of things that somebody would write. Here is a quote from one of my favorite style manuals. It was The Best of Sentences, It Was the Worst of Sentences by June Casagrande. And this was really created for professional writers, but there are so many really useful tips explained in a clear, engaging way in this text. One of my favorite quotes from the text comes very early in the piece, and it's called Thy Reader, Thy God. If you want to master the art of the sentence, you must first accept a somewhat unpleasant truth, something a lot of writers would rather deny. The reader is king. You are his servant. You serve the reader information. You serve the reader entertainment. Only by knowing your place can you do your job well. You have a boss, a fickle, exacting, surprisingly slick one. And you can't ignore him just because he isn't physically reading over your shoulder. Good writing hangs in the balance. Here's another way to think about this. Your writing is not about you. It's about the reader. Even when it's quite literally about you, in memoirs, personal essays, first-person accounts, it's not really about you. So one of the things that we are going to learn is how readers think. And those of us who have really rich reading lives and that do a lot of reading probably are really adept at this already because we've spent so much time being readers ourselves. But for those of us who haven't, we need to spend more time really understanding what reader expectations are. So when we write like a reader, we're going to be thinking about how my decisions as a writer are creating expectations in the reader. Where do I successfully meet those expectations, thereby leading to the reader comprehending what I'm saying? Where do I not meet those expectations, thereby confusing the reader? And how can I revise what I've written to more effectively meet the reader's expectations and move them closer to understanding my purpose? So let's take a look at an example from the novel Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. We're just going to look at the first few sentences. I chose this text because I think that the opening is incredibly powerful, certainly very engaging. This is from the very beginning. Lydia is dead, but they don't know this yet. 1977, May 3rd, 6:30 in the morning. No one knows anything but this innocuous fact. Lydia is late for breakfast. So there are so many ways we could approach this piece of writing, and some of you probably are already diving right into breaking this apart and thinking about what it means and asking questions and doing all the different reader moves that you've been taught to do. But I want you to take a deep breath and step back for a moment. And let's read this and think about all the different expectations that the words and the punctuation create for us as readers. I could have just put the first sentence there. Lydia is dead. What a first sentence. Okay, so as far as expectations go, one of the biggest expectations I have is related to the question that I ask, right? And I'm sure all of you did too. How did she die? Who is Lydia? Why did she die? So this first sentence, as short as it is setting up the entire novel and the conflicts that will unfold. It's creating an expectation that I will have those questions answered. I will find out who Lydia is. I will find out how and why she died. In the second sentence, I know there are others involved somehow. They don't know this yet. I don't know who they is, but it's creating an expectation that the writer is going to tell me who they is. Next, she gives us a little tiny bit of the setting, a little bit of that context. So that is creating in me just a little bit of expectation that this setting will somehow be important, that these details will somehow matter to the conflict, the characters, etc. As we keep moving through, no one knows anything but this innocuous fact. So again, we have these people. Who are they? It's creating an expectation in me that they are going to somehow react to this fact. And then here is the fact. Announced by the colon. The colon is huge in creating reader expectations. When I see a colon, I know that what I'm about to read is going to elaborate on what I just read. So this innocuous fact, boom, colon, here's the fact. Lydia is late for breakfast. This creates an expectation that I'm going to find out more about how we know Lydia is late for breakfast. Why does it matter that Lydia is late for breakfast? So what I want to pull back now and emphasize in all these questions that I just asked, it's not so much that I'm reading this to unpack and analyze for character. There's a little bit of analyzing craft move here, but it's not quite so that I'm saying, oh, look how she used a colon. I'm going to use the colon in the same way. That might end up happening down the road. What I'm emphasizing here is the fact that by every word on this page, in the order of the words on the page, in the punctuation that is used, the writer is moving me from point A to point B, having no idea who Lydia is, now to wanting to know desperately who she is and how she died. The central question when we write like a reader is this: what does my reader need from me as the writer? And in order to answer that question, you have to know things about your audience. Who is your reader? And some of those things are elements that are true for basically almost every reader, and some won't be. And then what is it I want the reader to think, feel, or do? What is my purpose? And when we look at those two things together, but we really focus on how am I meeting the reader's expectations with what I write, we will learn to write more clearly and directly and rhetorically, because we are always anticipating the reader's needs. We will be learning what the reader needs and how to meet those needs, which are probably the most important questions we can ask when we sit down to write anything. Thanks for watching. I look forward to being with you again soon.